AI and consumption-based pricing creating budget volatility. This is the epitome of the intersection between FinOps and SaaS management. Hey there, J.R. Storment here, Executive Director at the FinOps Foundation, and excited to share some thoughts around the 2026 SaaS Management Index. This came over to us a few weeks back, and it was striking to me to see how many intersections we're seeing with our own State of FinOps survey data that's coming out in 2026 about what's happening in the industry in relation to FinOps and SaaS management intersecting. There's about 10 key points and takeaways that I'm going to walk through. But at the highest level, what we're seeing is that the discipline of FinOps managing highly variable consumption-based cloud spend in a dynamic, granular way, multifunctional distributed accountability, is really starting to come closely intersecting with the way software SaaS licensing is being managed by companies in the space. The first point from the SaaS Management Index that I noticed was that SaaS spend is increasing without portfolio growth. To me, what that means is that we're seeing a creep of, yes, there's shadow SaaS and shadow IT and those things, but we're seeing a creep of spend in existing contracts. We've seen this in our community and also in our own spend, where because of the consumption models that are introduced into SaaS spend, it's easier to spend more on the same contracts without actually adding licenses and seats. And that's driving a lot of sprawl and expansion. The second point was all about AI and consumption-based pricing creating budget volatility. This is like the epitome of the intersection between FinOps and SaaS management. SaaS and licensing in various places that typically have had very consistent financial moments of renewals where we know exactly how many seats, how many people, how many users are using that. Big organizations are starting to add AI components to that, and AI components to those licenses or seats or whatever it is have a variable consumption-based model that is sneakingly like cloud spend. It's not, it's distributed accountability. It's not tied to just a contract. It can change quickly. It's hard to forecast and predict. So these things are driving a need for more FinOps-like behaviors in a SaaS world and driving a lot of that convergence. The third point talked about shadow AI and rising AI investment accelerating enterprise adoption. We're seeing that same trend we saw 10 years ago with cloud or 15 years ago, depending on when the company started with cloud, which is cloud gets its start with somebody saying, I can't really wait for the central IT to provide the service from the data center or the license or whatever it is. I'm going to go start an AWS account or a Google account. That's happening with AI right now. Same pattern, which means people are signing up with their credit cards to start buying things. They're starting to expense that stuff, and then it hits some critical threshold in the enterprise where they really care about the spending. It's too much spending. It's not enough control over compliance and licensing. And the organization comes in and says, we need to get this under control and consolidate it. In cloud before, that was consolidating a bunch of credit card accounts into enterprise agreements or into consolidated billing structures. And we're seeing a similar thing with AI spend, where there might be hundreds or thousands of people using ChatGPT or whatever their favorite one is, and the organizations are then needing to go and consolidate it into an enterprise agreement. We're still seeing, to their fourth point, a lot of waste in licensing, as the report talked about, but really in all IT spend, whether it be cloud or licensing or SaaS or anything else. That is improving, but it's still significant. And the reason for that, I think also, is that it's very easy for organizations to sign up and use these things. And when we talk about AI in particular, every organization is like, go fast, go hard, get the stuff you need to get outputs. But that results in a lot of, particularly coupled with that last point, shadow IT, a lot of overlapping licenses, a lot of unused licenses. I'm going to admit, I have like 3 paid subscriptions with different, top model providers, and I probably really only use one to get the full value. I should get rid of the other 2, but I still keep them there because I sign up on my credit card and I only think about it when I expense it, right? And we're seeing that really scale out, particularly across the enterprise. That's getting to the fifth point, which is really aligned with what the FinOps Foundation sees, is that FinOps and ITAM are converging. Right. So ITAM historically is focused on licensing, but around compliance, around security, around making sure we've got the renewals sorted. FinOps really around the variable consumption base and cloud. Those two have to come together in this new world where SaaS and licensing has a cloud-like element, and cloud has to think a lot more about licensing and SaaS. And with the FinOps Foundation's own data, we see that FinOps has expanded way beyond cloud in the last 2 years to touch on SaaS and licensing, also data center, also data clouds. And that means all these ideas about licensing and cloud management have to come together into a consolidated practice, whether it's a single team or 2 teams working closely together. The sixth point was that renewals drive the majority of SaaS cost outcomes. We have a term for this. We call it financial moments. In SaaS and in licensing, unlike cloud. So cloud has a bunch of financial moments, right? A developer decides to spin up an instance that costs money. You buy a reserved instance that saves money. There's financial moments constantly in cloud. With SaaS and licensing, typically that happens at renewal point, once a year, once every 3 years. So what we're seeing happen is the optimization is not happening until people hit that renewal point with SaaS too often. In cloud, you're continuously optimizing, you're continuously improving. So when you get to the renewal point, you know what you're using, you can forecast that forward. Unfortunately, with a renewal-based approach, you get there, you want to optimize, but you're already locked in or trued up even to a higher level. And so those cost outcomes are coming less frequently. And that's where we're seeing the FinOps approach of continuous, real-time, granular data-driven approach start to hit the SaaS outcomes and get to a more iterative way of managing costs. And the last point was that operational maturity gaps are limiting SaaS management. That means there's not the right amount of staff, there's not the right, not that there's not the right data, but there's not the right trust in the data. And the processes that were set up for license and SaaS management are not operating in the way that a consumption-based model needs. Remember, all the way back to those earlier points, AI is driving a consumption-based model into SaaS and licensing, which is the way cloud operates. Historical ways of managing SaaS and licensing in a consumption-based model don't work because you end up with the renewal not aligned with how much you're spending, not having done the optimization work, and in a knife fight without the right data at the end of the day. So by bringing all this earlier into the process, putting the spend visibility in front of the consumers of the spend, enabling the central teams with the right data and more agile processes, that's hopefully going to set up these converged FinOps, ITAM, SAM, SaaS, ITFM, whatever converged group you're seeing, to be in a spot to make better technology value decisions. Because FinOps and SaaS management and SAM and ITAM and all these are not about saving money. They're about making decisions about where we want to invest to get better value outcomes. And that's what we're hoping to see all this come together on, so that we're not just working to cut costs, we're hoping to drive more business with the right data in the right time, in the right place, the right people to make those decisions, and maybe even spend more on technology because we're getting a lot more benefit back to the business. So I was really excited to see these outcomes. It aligns closely, I think, to our State of FinOps 2026 data here at the FinOps Foundation, and excited to see, I think, really how all this converges more fully into 2026 and beyond.